Hello, my name is Jawade Bazzi, and today I'll be doing my research report. First, I'll start with my introduction, and after that, I'll just talk about, well, during my introduction, I'll just talk about my argument and just what I'm trying to uh, recommend and persuade. And then through that, I'll do that through methodology, um, two methodology slides, and then a results slide. And then just after that, just provide an analysis of everything. And then after my analysis and everything like that, just provide my conclusion. So today, I just want to talk about how my recommendation is that male and female athletes in collegiate and professional sports should receive a lot more exposure through social media and television broadcasting networks, especially with the increase of name, image, and likeness. College athletes in particular have already benefited from additional exposure because it has allowed for them to increase their brand and receive more money or different forms of compensation through NIL, and the more that their names are reaching. This has proven to be beneficial to the NCAA because more and more athletes in college are utilizing all of their resources to make the most out of their collegiate experience. In sports like basketball in particular, athletes are choosing to stay in college until their eligibility is up rather than going pro, which is making the NCAA more money. There is also a buzz in women's sports right now, so the more exposure that collegiate and professional female athletes can get will prove to only benefit social media platforms and television channels that allow fans to see more of these athletes. I feel like providing these athletes this exposure will benefit everybody in the situation because both sides will get a lot more money and be able to keep the loyalty of fans and viewers. At the same time, increasing the number of people that are interested in watching. So my methodology, um, this is my plan to put this in action. So according to Duke law, if you know sport, you know this is beyond a reasonable doubt. There is an average of 10 to 12% performance gap between elite males and elite females. The gap is smaller between elite females and non-elite males, but it's still insurmountable. That's ultimately what matters. Men have always been known to have better times, scores, and overall performances than women in sports. Athletes at the collegiate, professional, and even Olympic level have all been compared to each other in their respective sport. Even the most elite levels of competition have been compared and have always resulted as males having the better performance. It can all be traced back to the biological makeup of athletes. The differential isn't a result of the boys and men having a male identity, more resources, better training, or superior discipline. It's because they have an androgenized body. These biological differences explain the male and female secondary sex characteristics, which develop during puberty and have lifelong effects, including those most important for success in sport. While female athletes can't compete with male athletes performance-wise, they can still do what they can to gain viewership in their sports, create a brand for themselves, and create lucrative opportunities for themselves. In order to receive views, in order to receive views and increase profit, females will still have to compete and perform at a high level that will bring in more viewership. Though there has to be a continued rise in buzz in the sport that gives them exposure. In order to implement this, different social media platforms and brands should reach out to more female athletes that they feel would be a good ambassador for them and increase their profit. In order to do this, the platforms and brands have to be willing to provide fair compensation to these athletes. And if it's a collegiate athlete, the platforms and brands will have to make sure that their advertising falls in line with NCAA NIL guidelines. In order to implement this plan for television channels, they have to provide these athletes more exposure on their networks. Most men's sports are already broadcasted for people to watch. Women's sports, however, are not broadcasted on as many channels, and some women's sports are not shown at all. This past year there has been a steady rise in viewership numbers for women's sports. The WNBA postseason saw a 22% increase in viewership year over year. Yet, women's sports receive only 5% of media coverage, according to a recent study by the University of Southern California and Purdue University. These television channels should start broadcasting these sports and advertise them in a way that will grasp the attention of viewers. As I stated earlier, female athletes are not biologically made to outperform male athletes. Their most elite athletes in each of their respective sport and gender has historically shown that the male athletes will have better scores or performances. Until there is a female that matches the performance of an elite male in a sport, there have to be other ways to boost the viewership and the profits that women receive in their sports. This has already been done and can be improved by giving women's sports a bigger platform and increasing their fan base in their sports as a whole and through individuals. Deloitte forecasts that in 2024, for the first time, women's elite sports will generate a revenue that surpasses $1 billion, a 300% increase on the industry's evaluation in 2021. This increase in profit in elite sports was done without a strong motive to do so. It is not really determined what has brought this increase in particular, but it is most likely because of the rise in popularity in certain athletes in their sports. A big example would be WNBA player Caitlin Clark and her unseen before performances throughout her collegiate career at Iowa. This is because 2023 was a pivotal year for women in sports, a tipping point defined by the record-breaking events like the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament and the Women's World Cup. It was also sparked by an increase of channels and broadcasters that were showing Caitlin Clark's games and highlights on a daily basis, which is something that can be done for other female athletes in these sports. Sports in general is something that people across the world enjoy watching as a pastime, whether it is basketball, baseball, football, swimming, soccer, etc. The problem is that there are two sides to some of these sports, meaning that women and men play these sports. Throughout history and as of right now, there is a large gap between men and women's sports in almost every aspect. This is the wage gap, viewership, and most importantly, performance. There is no way to fix the performance issue, as I stated before, but there are ways to make women's sports more entertaining in order to increase the viewership and profits in the sport. There are certain things and strategies that need to be implemented in order to reach this goal. The solution to lowering the gap between women's and men's sports would be to start by the use of name, image, and likeness in collegiate sports. NIL is not a solve-all solution because there is still a lot of confusion about it, and a lot of athletes are still not satisfied with the guidelines, especially women in particular. Between athletes still feeling shortchanged despite name, image, and likeness, compensation coaches and administrators feeling generally unhappy with the unregulated Wild West landscape of NIL. Though NIL has still been something that has helped about the individual profit and brand of female athletes. Athletes like Caitlin Clark, like I stated before, who has previously played basketball at the University of Iowa, and Livy Dunn, who is currently a gymnast at LSU, are not only the highest paid female athletes in the NCAA, but are also among some of the highest paid athletes on the men's side as well, men and female side as well. This has allowed them to bring more awareness and profit to their name, school, and sport. At the professional level, endorsement play the same role. Sabrina Ionescu is one of the highest paid players in WNBA because of her latest collab and released shoes with Nike. By implementing a boost in social media coverage and other broadcasts in general, this will go a long way in solving the problem with viewership and lowering the gap between male and female sports. A documented disparity exists in media coverage of men and women athletes. Women receive less coverage, and much of it focuses on stereotypes instead of athletic performance, undermining women's sports and status. If the media and large social media platforms are not providing female athletes with the same exposure as male athletes, then it will almost be impossible for them to compete when it comes to viewership. It has already been proven that the more famous female athletes in their sports have been able to increase viewership and profit in their sport. This can be done by companies and social media platforms reaching out to athletes or teams as a whole and compensating them in some form that is legal. This will allow female athletes at the collegiate and professional level to make a name for themselves and reach more fans that will be drawn to their sport. This can also be done by broadcasters promoting and showing more of athletes and their teams to make these sports more accessible to fans. This plan works because it has already been in place. There just has not been a strong motive to continue or create new opportunities for female athletes and their sports. An extensive literature exists on the differences in media portrayals of men and women athletes, and a disparity has been documented in the way women athletes are covered and discussed. Media coverage can shape how athletes are perceived and treated by the public. If the way the women are portrayed on social media improves and is increased, this will boost viewership by large margins. The first ever network to focus on female athletes, the Women's Sports Network, launched Wednesday, offering 24/7 streaming of original programming, competitions, documentaries, etc. This network alone has already increased viewership in women's sports. If larger networks like ESPN continue to increase their promotion and showing of female athletes in sports, both the network and the athletes, as well as their teams and sports, will have an increase in profit. Having increased media exposure and broadcasting coverage will only prove beneficial to schools, teams, sports, networks, and individual athletes because viewership and interest will increase more than it already has. So, in conclusion, I strongly encourage that male and female athletes in collegiate and professional sports should receive this increased exposure through social media and television broadcasting networks, especially with the increase of name, image, and likeness. I feel like providing these athletes this exposure will benefit all parties, will benefit all parties in this situation because both sides will get a lot more money and be able to sorry about that. Get a lot more money and be able to keep the loyalty of fans and viewers, while at the same time increasing the number of people that are interested in watching. It has already been proved in women's sports like basketball and gymnastics at the collegiate level, and even basketball, gymnastics, and soccer at the professional and Olympic level. Networks like ESPN broadcasted the women's NCAA basketball tournament, which has brought ESPN increased viewership in recent years and benefit the NCAA, professional female sports teams, and individual athletes as a whole. So, like I said, the plan that I put forth has already pretty much been utilized. It just hasn't have a strong motive or a lot of people that are trying to stick to it. But I feel that through the strategies I named and everything like that, that women's sports will increase in viewership. That's all I have. Thank you.